Welcome to Chess for Children's course. How to beat your 10-year-old at chess. With National Master Steve Colding. Part 4A Checkmates. You need to know. A sandwich checkmate.
1. Cut the board in half. Step 2. Take away 3 more rows. Step 3. Dance with the king. Step 4. Trap the king. Step 5. King versus king. And step 6. Put the queen in between. Involves the king and queen versus the king. Okay, we call it the sandwich checkmate because the kings are the bread and the queen comes in between. Now let's look how we do this. There are 6 steps to this. Okay, step 1 is to cut the board in half. And so that's what we do. Now we have taken away this half of the board. Are there other ways to do that? Sure, we could play this move, which cuts this, takes away this half of the board, or we could play this move, which takes away this half of the board, or we could play this move, which takes away this half of the board. Doesn't really matter which half you take away. It just matters that you do take away half the board for step 1. Okay, well, let's go back to this one. We took away half the board. Now the king moves. Okay, step 2 is to take away 3 more rows. Now we take away 3 more rows, and here we go. We took away these 3 rows. Now what do kings and queens do together? They dance. So every move that the king makes, the queen will make the same move. Okay, that's wrong. King moves to the side, queen moves to the side, king moves down, queen moves down. Here we go, and we're dancing until the king gets to the edge of the board. Now the edge of the board is the last row on any side of the board, and then step 4 comes in. When the king gets to the edge of the board, the queen traps him on the edge of the board. Now notice the queen controls this row, so that means the king cannot come off of that row or he'll be in check. And now, once the queen traps the king, then the other king comes up. Okay, and here king face king. Here we go. Okay, and now the kings are facing each other, and the queen, step 6, the queen comes in between, and it is checkmate. The game is over. Are there other ways to do that? Yes, of course there's other ways to do it. Let's look at another way. Here the queen went to a4. King up, and now it's checkmate. Now notice the kings aren't directly in front of each other, but that's okay. The idea is that the queen must go in the king's face like this, but must be protected by the other king. So this is the sandwich checkmate. Hope you liked it. We'll go on to our next checkmate.
Checkmate with the king and rook.
With the king and rook are as follows. Step 1, cut the board in half. Step 2, bring the king to the middle. Step 3, bring the rook to the middle. Step 4, cut down the amount of squares of the king until he has only 2 left. Step 5, checkmate. Checkmate starts out, step 1, cut the board in half. But in this case, cutting the board in half is important to know that the rook cannot chase the king to the edge of the board by itself. So he needs the king to help him out. So cutting the board in half has to be to the edge that's closest to the king. So the king moves out the way. Now step 2, bring the king to the middle. Okay? Step 3, bring the rook to the middle. And once we bring the rook to the middle, we have actually taken 3/4 of the board. The rook is very good at that and in cutting down all the lines. So now it's a matter of step 4, bringing the king and rook to start cutting down lines little by little. So king comes up. Now rook, notice the rook cuts off all of these lines. Now the king is now left down to only 12 squares. So here we go. King comes over. Notice he's chasing the king, and the king comes here. Now this is important because the king could have came straight down here, but he takes even more squares this way. This is a good rule of thumb. Knights move away from the king. Okay, and now he checks. Very rarely in this is check good, but this situation where the kings are facing each other, then the check becomes pretty good. So the king is forced to the back row, and now notice the king only has 4 squares left. Okay. Now the king has 3. Now the king has 2. Now when the king has 2 squares, you have to make sure that he keeps those 2 squares, because if it's down to 1, you run the risk of stalemating him, and you don't want to stalemate him when you can checkmate. So king over, and now how we find checkmate? Well, how many squares does the king have? The king has 2 squares. What kind of line is it? Straight line. Well, what piece attacks in a straight line? A rook. And so where would the rook go to checkmate? It goes here, and that is checkmate. All the squares are taken away. That is the king and rook checkmate, or some people call it the square checkmate.
Check 'em with the king and 2 bishops.
Is as follows. Break the board up into quadrants. Chase the king to one of the quadrants. 3. Put the bishops on the magic squares. 4. Put the king on the correct square. Number 5. Cut the king down to 2 squares. Number 6. Lose a move. And number 7. Checkmate. In a checkmate with the king and 2 bishops, the board must first be broken up into 4 equal parts or quadrants. The next step is to chase the king to one of these quadrants and trap him there. Is then to place the bishops on their magic squares. The magic square, when you place the bishops on the correct squares, they stop the king from coming out, and they also protect the bishops from being attacked by the king. So placing the bishops on the magic square happens in this position, in this position, in this position, and in this position. Placing the bishops on the magic square again does 2 things. 1, it traps the king within the quadrant, and 2, it stops the king from attacking the bishops. The next step is to place the king in the correct square, and this would usually be, depending on the quadrant, the A, B, G, or H files in front of the bishops, and usually the ideal would be either the B or the G file. That would be ideal, but also the A or the H file is also good in most cases. Okay, now I can be in this position, this position, this position, or in this position. Once we have the king and the right setup, then mate can occur. And so the next step begins, which is cutting down the squares of the king. Well, that shouldn't take longer than 2 moves. King moves, we take that square. King moves, we take that square. And now this is the dangerous point. The king only has 2 squares. So if we take the last square that the king has hit, guess what? It's stalemate and it's a draw, and we feel really silly because we have more material and the guy got away with the draw. But we have to learn the idea of losing a move. Okay, if we make that move, we have to wait till the king comes over to that square so it will be checked. So what we do is lose a move, and we lose a move like this. Okay, once we lose a move and the king is forced to step over, then we check and then deliver the final check, and it's checkmate. Now we will see a practical example in the next slide of how to do this. Straight the checkmate with the two bishops. Now here we've put the king on one of the quadrants already because we just don't have the time to show you how to get them from one quadrant to another. But anyway, the step one is to chase the king to one of the 4 quadrants on the board. Step 2 is now in progress, which is put the bishops on the magic squares. So we put one bishop on the magic squares. Now the king's coming up to try to harass the bishop. The bishop stops him from coming there, so the king now tries to escape. And now the bishops are on the magic square. Now the next step is to bring the king to either A3 or B3. And let's see. Okay, there the king goes. Okay, and now that task has been accomplished. Now the next step is to start taking away squares from the king. Okay, he moved to C1, we take away D1. He moves to B1, and now we take away C1. And now the king only has 2 squares. And again, like in the rook or square checkmate, you've got to be careful when the king only has 2 squares. So now we must lose a move. Keep the position the same, but make sure that we don't leave the king with 2 squares. Okay, so the king moves over, and now we lose a move by this move. Everything's the same except that we just lost a move, and now it's black's move, and now we deliver the final checkmate. Okay, hope that's understandable. I think it's pretty easy, and enjoy. We're on to the next checkmate. This is Steve Colding, and the last checkmate you need to know is the bishop and knight checkmate. Okay, but we can leave that for another time. And so you have a pretty good arsenal now, and you'll be able to checkmate those 10-year-olds when you take their material. Okay, now if you like this video, like us on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you see us. Visit our website,